Hi, welcome back. Now we're going to focus on interest rates. And this is going to be the basis of many conversations that we have throughout this class. So it's really important to get these basics spot on. So I want you to pause here and think about, what is interest? Essentially, interest is the price of having access to someone else's money. And the interest rate is the cost of the loan, or if you are a lender, it's the return that you get on the loan that you've made. Now, when we think about interest rates, typically what we are actually thinking about is something called a nominal interest rate. In other words, in name only, the interest rate that is literally written down on your loan agreement or your loan paperwork. That's the nominal rate. Okay. However, what we will find out is that interest rates actually have a few components. Now, in reality, outside of this class, typically interest rates have four components, and we're going to find out that those components are the real interest rate, inflation, collateral, and risk. And all of those in the real world get added together to come up with that nominal interest rate. But in this class, we're going to simplify that down much more, and we're only going to examine two components. And in this class, whenever you're answering these questions about this, I just want you to focus on the two components of the nominal rate. Okay, so let's look at those right now. Okay, you can see here we have something called the Fisher formula. And this very simplified approach helps us to quickly calculate what we think the real interest rate might be. Now, it's an approximation, but it does pretty quickly get us to a good estimation of the real price of a loan. And so let's examine that for just a minute. If we look at the Fisher formula, what we'll see is that our nominal rate here is represented with the lowercase I, and this is the interest rate that is actually on our paperwork when we're paying back our loan. However, what happens is that the interest that we pay back on loans, it has some noise in it, and that noise is the kind of static created by inflation. So when a lender gives us a loan or offers us a loan, they are seeking to make money off of giving access to their money. And so they need to be able to determine what to them is a price that allows them to continue operating their business, the business of access to money. And so they're trying to plan ahead and to predict what price will allow them to cover the costs of operating, as well as to make a profit on access to this money. Okay, well, enter, the static or the noise of inflation. They might offer you an interest rate. However, if inflation is high that year, well, the value of the money that you pay back might not be as high as the value of the money that they lent out, even though in nominal dollars, you're actually paying back more nominal dollars. The real value that you're paying back could be substantially lower. And so that's kind of why we have this little simplified formula to help us make these predictions. What do I estimate is the real price of the loan that I am taking out? Or if I'm the lender, what is the real price that I'm charging others to have access to this money? The key problem here is that, we can have expected inflation, but in the end, that the expectations of inflation might not exactly match up with how inflation actually plays out in whatever term that loan is for. Okay, but anyway, when we're looking at the Fisher formula, what we see is that our small I is symbolizing the nominal rate. We're using pi as a symbol to represent inflation. This is not saying that the inflation was literally 3.14, but rather here it's just operating as a visual signifier to say that we are looking at adding together the real interest rate and expected inflation to determine what the nominal rate would be on our loan paperwork. Now, any rearrangement of this will give us one of our other numerical values. So for example, we could take, if we only had our nominal rate and we only had whatever the inflation rate was for that year, we could take our nominal rate, subtract out the actual inflation that occurred, and determine what the real interest rate was for that loan in that time period. Okay. And so this Fisher formula, while it's not mathematically the most precise, it gives us a pretty good ballpark estimate of what the real rate is. Okay. And then finally, I want to take a moment here and to highlight one of the differences between our Fisher formula and actual formulas that are used in banking and financing today. Okay, this is simply an introduction to the components of interest rates, and this is the standard that we'll use in this class. Okay, we'll examine another way of calculating interest and so forth, and inflation and so on later. But anyway, in the financial world, remember that we are also including in our formula points based on collateral and points based on risk, assessment of risk of whoever is requesting that loan. And so those are other components that get added in. But for all intents and purposes in this class, we're not going to include those in any of our calculations. But if you choose to continue on and you're interested in looking into that in the future, I strongly recommend looking at how loans today in the world are actually calculated using some of these much more advanced points that get incorporated into that formula. Anyway, thanks for stopping by, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we do next with these interest rates. Have a good one. Bye.